Bobbie Lovell. I grew up in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. I currently live in De Pere. I am a member of Wisconsin Fellowship of Poets, and I am part of the group that coordinates the Poetry Unlocked reading series in Appleton. I have been writing, I think forever, but really I've been writing poems and keeping them since I was 12. Wow. So they were not awesome, but I wrote poems on the regular pretty much through college. I have them in binders, typed up on paper, and one of my projects has been to I don't want to throw them out, so I've been typing them into like a Word doc, so I can get, decide about the paper. Actually, as I was getting established in my career and got married, started a family, poetry dwindled off in my life. So then there was a period where I was not writing much other than maybe journaling, and that became a problem. Well, other than like high school silliness, I was published in the Sheep's Head Review, which is the literary magazine of the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay, while I attended there, some poems. But then I was more involved with that publication as a graphic designer. Like, my two great loves in life are visual art and poetry, so when it came time to choose a career path, I went more toward the visual side, but I also took writing classes. And so one day I'm working in the graphics lab at UW Green Bay, and some guy comes in and says, "Are you the designer who also writes?" I said, "Well, yes I am."
I think so, yeah.
So I guess I'm the designer who also writes, and that's kind of been something I carried with me. But so, back to the Sheep's Head days, I would say was my first publication, but then poetry is something I just kind of did alone in my room. It was weird, and even other than class, I didn't share it and didn't really even aspire to share it. So I just, carried on, like I said, with my career and family, and then came back to it later. And at that point, I found Poetry Community, of which there is a lot to be found in Wisconsin. Who knew? And fabulous poets and mentors and opportunities. So I went seeking and fortunately found my people, and started writing a lot. I've been published in places like Blue Heron Review, Mobius, the Journal of Social Change, Starline, which is the Journal of the Science Fiction Poetry Association, regional publications like that, and several anthologies. So I eventually had this pile of poems and had no clue what to do with them, so I took Carla Houston's chapbook class at the Mill, a place for writers in Appleton, which was fabulous, and out of that came a manuscript that became my book. It's called Proposition at the Walk-in Infinity Chamber. It was published by Finishing Line Press in 2017. So yes, I have a chapbook. Yeah, so I do have a manuscript kind of in the works. I'm in no hurry with it, but it's tentatively titled Tween. And it's about parenting my kids kind of in these uncertain times sort of deal. So I will eventually do something with that. I spend my available time, more writing and attending events than submitting. I find a lot of value in poetry events. One of the things I discovered once I found Poetry Community is that's where it really comes alive, when somebody's in front of an audience reading. Not that there's anything wrong with, curling up with a book. That's awesome too, but it's just a whole different experience.
Yeah.
I would like to do more of that. I'm involved with the Poetry Unlocked reading series in Appleton, and it's really been rewarding to see how that is growing and evolving and bringing in some different people who are themselves finding their tribe there, just as I came seeking myself some years ago. And then events that are associated with social justice causes, I think, are important, that involve the arts. 100,000 Poets for Change, for example, and then last year I participated in the event that you, Nathan, organized, Constitutional Cabaret. So I was one of 6 featured poets, and I read a set about gun violence and racism, and I think it's really important to tie in social aspects to poetry when it's appropriate. It's also good to just be fun and expressive and creative and
Play with language.
yeah, play with words. My formal education is in visual art, so I came to think of poetry as another art medium. So whereas with paint, you create paintings with words, you can create poetry. One of my favorite aspects of poetry is its ability to connect humans. For an example, I might go to a reading and read a poem at an open mic or whatever, and somebody in the audience might come to me afterward and say, like, oh, I knew exactly what you were talking about when you read such and such poem, and then they'll tell me their whole story, and maybe it has nothing to do with whatever experience I had that inspired the poem in the first place, but that doesn't really even matter, because what that did is connected us, and each of us feel less alone in the world through the work. So I think that's really important. Well, now with the internet, it's like I'm just a kid in a candy store it's overwhelming. I've read poets like Dorian Locks, for example, Camille Dungy, book-wise, but then I've also encountered slam poets and performance poets, Rachel Wiley, Sarah Kay, and then I'm also influenced a lot just by local poets around me that I get a lot of exposure to and am inspired by. And when I first became interested in studying contemporary poetry, Anne Sexton and Frank O'Hara resonated with me. Anne Sexton, from her female perspective and, struggled with mental illness. And then Frank O'Hara, he worked at the Museum of Modern Art in New York and hung with all these awesome artists. So, it's a very casual style with a lot of ekphrastic elements that I like. Growing up, like when I was 12, I didn't have any exposure to poetry really in my home.
Classics.
None.
No,
really,
wow.
no. Nothing.
But you wrote it.
80s song lyrics. I listened to a lot of song lyrics. Obviously not high poetry, but I would transpose song lyrics onto paper. Back then you couldn't just look them up on the internet. Then I would study the word patterns and the rhyme schemes, and then I would make my own versions of songs. I'm seeing an interest in diversity and collaboration, and I really hope we are able to achieve that more in our poetry community. So bringing in different kinds of artists, visual, songwriters, theater, who knows, and bring in, combine academic poets maybe with performance poets, and just bring people all into the fold so that people can see the diversity of poems and poets that Wisconsinites are doing. We talked about diversity and different perspectives, I guess, but I'm a single working mom of 2 teenagers. Not that that makes me extremely different from anybody else, but it's what I bring to the table, and that's where my voice comes from right now. And I think it's just maybe important to note that everybody who is a poet has their own diverse perspective and background. Not everybody is a professor of English or you know, I don't know, a rapper or like I think when I first started attending readings, I'm not sure what I expected,
Right.
but I think I was surprised at what I found. There's a diversity of ages, and like I think I expected maybe poets to look a certain way, and they don't.
Right. They're all different.
They're all different, which is great, you know. So the poem I'm going to read is from my book, my chapbook, Proposition at the Walk in Infinity Chamber, and it's about kind of being on the edge, literally and metaphorically, and just being resilient. So this is called What It Is About the Cliff. Each time I flee to the crumbling precipice, leap the narrow chasm and wax triumphant atop the limestone tower. Each time I plop my butt on the chilly rim and dangle my legs above the trees, admire the sight of feet released from the ground. Each time a choice presents itself. However subconscious, however primal, the urge to slide off the edge without fanfare or to run boldly as Icarus into the air, suspended for a nanosecond before gravity says never. Each time I leap back and re-shoulder the yoke of worldly cares, its buckets heavy with bricks of loss and duty. It's said that if we attempted to barter our troubles, we'd take back our own, the ones about which we know something. Each time I return from the cliff is a holy yes to living, to resilience. I brought this anthology, which is one of my favorite projects I've been associated with, called From Everywhere a Little, a migration anthology. And it was edited by Dawn Hogue and Lisa Vihos. Lisa Vihos organizes the 100,000 Poets for Change annual event in Sheboygan. And one year, she suggested a theme of migration and immigration, and people brought poems accordingly. And it was such a special reading that they turned it into an anthology and invited additional submissions. And this topic is close to my heart, so I'd like to read the poem that I have in here. This is called Lullaby for Troubled Times. Forget this world, its disrepair. Forget the poisoned land and air. Forget the stranded polar bear. Sleep, baby, sleep. Forget how sea will overflow. Forget the bleaching reef below. Forget the giant garbage flow. Sleep, baby, sleep. Forget the hunger greed can't quell. Forget the dizzy carousel of toys and games they try to sell. Sleep, baby, sleep. Forget the sick of heart and head. Forget the guns they love instead. Forget the hate that hate has bred. Sleep, baby, sleep. Forget the insults you will hear. Forget the need to persevere. Forget that they don't want you here. Sleep, baby, sleep. Forget the left. Forget the right. Forget the laws they will rewrite, while many suffer out of spite. Sleep, baby, sleep. Forget the wars you didn't choose. Forget the children they abuse. Forget the life you stand to lose. Sleep, baby, sleep. Forget the bombs that might be dropped. Each power play they try to top. Forget the end that can't be stopped. Sleep, baby, sleep. Sleep with progress, science too, diplomacy, the golden rule. Dream of all the good you do. Sleep, baby, sleep. Bobbie Lee Lovell, and I wish everybody a happy Poetry Month.